let's dive in. Today, we're looking at something huge, one of the most ambitious tech projects happening anywhere in the world, really. We're talking about India's massive push to become a real powerhouse in semiconductors.
So let's just start with a thought experiment, right? What if the one piece of tech that runs basically everything, your phone, your car, the internet itself, what if all of that came from just one or two spots on the entire planet? That's not a hypothetical. It's a huge global risk we're all living with.
And wow, take a look at this. This is the reality we're talking about. When you look at the really advanced chips, the brains behind AI, the most powerful computers, all that cutting edge stuff, almost all of them, like 90%, come from Taiwan. That is a wild number. It basically means the whole world is relying on this one single point, creating a supply chain that's, well, incredibly fragile.
Okay, so that's the problem. It's a massive global choke point. But to really get why this is such a big deal and why a country like India is jumping into this race, we need to quickly talk about what these things, these semiconductors, actually are.
So the easiest way to think about it is this. A semiconductor chip is literally the brain in every single electronic device you own. And inside that brain, you have millions or even billions of these tiny little switches called transistors. They're like microscopic brain cells just firing off signals and passing messages around at lightning speed.
And, sticking with that brain analogy, it's all about density. The more brain cells you can pack into a small space, the smarter it gets, right? It's the exact same with chips. The smaller and smaller you can make those transistors, we're talking down to 2 nanometers now, which is just mind-bogglingly small, the more you can cram onto a single chip. And what does that mean for you? Well, your gadgets get way faster, they get lighter, and they don't drain your battery in 5 minutes. It's that constant push for more power in a smaller package.
Now, why does everyone want a piece of this action? Well, the stakes are just massive. We're not just talking about making cool tech. Look at that number, $1 trillion, with a T. That's what the global semiconductor industry is expected to be worth by 2030. This isn't just an industry, it's becoming the cornerstone of the entire global economy.
So you've got this global choke point on one side and this trillion-dollar prize on the other. What's India's move? Well, they've launched this huge multi-billion-dollar plan called the India Semiconductor Mission. Let's take a look at how they're actually trying to pull this off.
Okay, so the whole mission is built on these 4 main pillars. It's not just one thing. They're going after the big factories, the fabs, where the chips are actually made. They're also targeting the factories that make our screens and displays. Then you have these specialized chips for things like 5G or electric cars. And finally, and this is super important, they're incentivizing the actual design of the chips right there in India. It's a really comprehensive approach.
So, here's the billion-dollar question. Actually, the multi-billion-dollar question. How do you get the big global companies to build these incredibly expensive factories in your country? I mean, these things cost a fortune. India's answer is pretty straightforward. Money. They're basically saying, come build here and we'll cover up to half the cost. That is a seriously aggressive way to get things moving.
But, and this is really the key part, it's not just about throwing cash at factories. That won't work on its own. They know they have to build a whole ecosystem from the ground up. So you see things like training programs for 100,000 engineers. You see support for brand new startups. You see them partnering up with countries like the US and building new centers to design the next generation of chips. They're playing the long game here.
All right, so the plan sounds amazing, right? But let's be real. This is a massive, massive undertaking. It's one thing to have a great blueprint, but actually building this thing, that's a whole different story. It's a really steep uphill climb.
And I really can't overstate this. We're talking about one of the most difficult, most expensive, and most complicated things a country can possibly try to do. The amount of money, technology, and pure logistical muscle required is just staggering.
And here's a look at what that mountain is made of. First, the cost. It's not just building the fabs, it's the constant, insane cost of research and development. Then, you need a whole supply chain for all the special materials and chemicals, which India doesn't really have yet. You've got global politics to worry about, finding enough people with the super specific skills needed, and the fact that they don't yet own a lot of the core technology, the IP. I mean, each one of these things on its own is a huge problem to solve.
Okay, so we've seen the dream and we've seen the challenges. The big question is, what's the actual roadmap? How are they planning to get from here to there and build a real, sustainable chip nation?
Well, the strategy basically lines up perfectly with those challenges we just talked about. They're going to push hard on homegrown R&D to create their own tech. They're going to use the world's changing politics to their advantage, positioning themselves as a trusted, reliable partner. Of course, they've got to build out all the necessary infrastructure and double down on creating that skilled workforce we mentioned. And the final piece is getting everyone, government, companies, universities, to work together.
And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? This was the theme of a big industry conference in India, building the next semiconductor powerhouse. That captures the ambition perfectly. They're not just aiming to be another player on the field. They want to be one of the main contenders.
So, they've got the plan, they're putting up the money, and the world definitely needs more options for where its chips come from. But it all comes down to this one question. Is this ambitious blueprint going to be enough to actually change the game?